Hey everyone, how's it going today? And welcome to another episode. So today's episode is going to be pretty important because what I really want to talk about is really about the most recent jobs report that was just released for the previous month. So it was released this month, but in reference to the last month. And because the long story short about that jobs report is that it was not very, very good. In fact, it's actually getting a lot worse, and that's why it makes it even more important that we talk about this subject right now. This video is going to be very relevant if you are currently looking for a job right now. Feel free to leave comments down below, but it's also going to be important even if you're not looking for a job, because the reality is that, as we've mentioned before in so many videos on our channel, is that so many of the different parts of our economy are all tied together, and that's the reason why this is so important. If people are struggling because they don't have jobs to work, it means that people's livelihoods are being impacted because there is no money coming in. If there is no money coming in, then it means that businesses are more likely to struggle because it means that they're not going to be spending money, and it means that money is going to be circulating a lot less. And it also does mean that as a whole, the economy is just going to struggle. There are also a lot of fears right now that we may be entering into a recession relatively soon. We don't know right now at this current point in time. I'm going to address that in a little bit, in a little bit, so definitely stay tuned watching. But feel free to leave your comments down below. But today's report is basically just going to be all about the jobs market, how our economy is doing, and what this means. Part of this is going to be related to articles, and part of this is going to be related to just personal experience as someone that's living there right now, that knows so many people that are unemployed and struggling with finding work right now at this time period. So that being said, let's get started. Like, comment, subscribe, or watch to the end to decide if you guys want to. It's greatly appreciated, and let's get started. So we're going to start by sharing the recent jobs report numbers which recently came out right here. And the real idea really behind this, and I'll just read it out because I know some people like to listen to this like a podcast from behind, but the idea is that they grew and added about 114,000 jobs in the month of July 2024, which is a very huge decline from the 179,000 jobs that were added in June. So originally in June they added 179,000 jobs, and now in the recent month, it dropped so drastically that they were only able to add 114,000 jobs. And a very, very massive shift from the originally estimated numbers of 185,000 jobs. So in other words, they were trying to reach for some improvement. The goal was to achieve 185,000 jobs, but they missed it very, very significantly and were only able to add 114,000 jobs. So they basically only achieved about 60 to 70% of their goal, leaving another 30 to 40% unachieved, sadly. And that's really the reality of it. I wish I could say things were better, but that's really just the reality of what's happening right now. And it was also noted that the unemployment rate rose to about 4.3% as well, which, just for general reference and record, is the highest number that it's been since October of 2021. So we are about to approach October of 2024. So it's basically been almost 3 years now that these numbers have, or almost the 3-year high, if that hopefully makes sense. We don't have to really say much beyond this part, but basically wages are definitely, as most people already know, they are not keeping up with inflation, meaning that things are getting very, very expensive while we are not making enough money to basically account for everything that's currently going on. So what does this exactly mean for us is that essentially right now the story is that there's a lot of people that are commenting, and feel free to leave your comments down below as well, that our country might be headed towards some kind of recession. There are also some people that say that our country is already in a recession, but we just haven't really acknowledged that yet. It really just depends on how you define the word recession, because obviously there's been so many definitions of what it means to be in a recession. I do know is that there's a lot of economic articles that talk about something called the Sahm's rule, S-A-H-M. You can also look it up, Sahm's rule. But really, basically, the idea behind this is that it's really just a rule that was released. I don't remember when it was released, but it was basically released where they really just define it. It's a rule in economics saying that when the 3-month average, and I'll just read it straight out from the definition, but when the 3-month average of unemployment rises by 0.5% higher than the 12-month low, then we are considered a recession. And if you look at this graph right here, which shows the unemployment rate, which basically rose from about 3.5% a year ago in July of 2023 to right now, which is basically about 4.13% right now, in that definition, because this, Sam's rule has been triggered, we are in a recession. And that's really the reality about what it is. But again, this really just depends on how you define the word recession. According to the Sam's rule, we are in a recession. According to a lot of other people, we are not yet in a recession, but we are headed towards that path. And the stock market, if you guys follow stocks, has been really, really volatile lately. You can see it's constantly been shooting up, then it's been crashing downwards. And a lot of this is anticipation because of the fear of the recession that might come. Again, I don't want to say it's coming because we don't know if it is coming, and it just really depends so much on how you define the word recession. But to some definitions, that's really what they categorize as whether or not we're headed towards a recession or not. So what is the exact significance about everything that I just mentioned now that you guys kind of have a better picture of what's going on in our economy in terms of actual raw statistics is really because of the fact that because right now we are going through very difficult times, as we've already mentioned before. There was a video that I recently made last time talking about why it feels so impossible to find a job right now. And I'm speaking as someone that's also with personal experience that have been trying to dabble in the job market to look for my own job on my own personal time, outside of this as well, that I totally feel the struggle right there as well, because I'm also in that particular situation going through the job hunt as well. But the idea really behind all of this is that the numbers that you actually see right here do not fully paint the full picture. And I think this is something that's really, really important to kind of mention out is that because going back to like a lot of times when it comes to just, numbers in general, it's really important to kind of define what actually is the definition of being unemployed and what is the actual definition or the math to how they calculate all of these numbers. And the reason why I say all of this is that because right now at this current time period, there are a lot of people that are currently unemployed, but were not counted in that 4-point-something% statistic. And the reason why they were not counted is either because they've been unemployed for such a long-term amount of time. So we're talking about people that have been unemployed for a year or even longer, that because they're part of the long-term unemployment situation, they may not necessarily be counted in the statistic, either because they don't fit the definition of someone actively looking for work, either because they've already given up on the job hunt process. So in other words, they're kind of people that have already given up on the unemployment situation because they feel that it's, almost feels hopeless in a lot of cases to find work because of how hard the job market is. Or there's people that are kind of working jobs, but they're not necessarily quality jobs. So they don't count in the unemployment statistic in the sense that because they're technically unemployed, not technically employed by definition. But the problem is that the quality of the job that they're working is not really up to par, and the wages that they're currently making is not currently a livable wage where they can sustainably survive, especially if they come from an area that has a very, very particular high cost of living. And I think that's really, really important to kind of mention it out there. So in other words, what this really means is, if there's any takeaway from this part, is that the unemployment numbers, we know what they are because we've just mentioned them, but the reality is that they're actually a lot worse than what we've actually stated, because there are so many people that are unemployed but just are not considered by the definition of what it means to be unemployed to be unemployed. So they're kind of there, but they're not accounted for. And I think that's really, really important to kind of take note about. Now, I do think it's also maybe really, really important to notice is that a lot of this stuff does depend so much on the industry that you're also in, but it's just collectively as a whole, most of the job market is really struggling. And this is the part that is not necessarily going to come from a news article, but it's going to come from personal experience of people that I know in regular everyday life, in a real life basis, because there's a lot of things that you cannot fully read an article for. There's a lot of things that you have to kind of just know from real life about people that we kind of interact with in our everyday basis, of knowing that there's so many people that are struggling in the job market, as we've already mentioned before, but that a lot of this stuff is also very dependent on the industry that you work in. I've heard stories about people that work in tech that supposedly a lot of layoffs are happening in that industry right now. I don't work in tech, so feel free to comment down if you have any experience about whether or not you are in tech or not in the tech industry. It's just an example of one industry that I've heard that has particularly been hit at this current time period. I can certainly say is that in my actual industry, because I actually live it firsthand, in the media, film, hospitality, and entertainment industry, we have been hit really hard, to levels that there are so many people I know that are my mentors that are now unemployed because of that situation. So you can only imagine that if a lot of my mentors and the veterans of these industries are currently unemployed, what it must be like for people that are entry level, that are still new to the economy, that are recent graduates, that are still trying to get their foot into the door. You can only imagine that it just becomes a whole new level of difficulty. And I think that that's probably one of the biggest things to really be able to absorb from all of this, is that it just really depends on so many different circumstances, but that collectively as a whole, at the end of the day, most people in most industries, things are just not looking very bright. And then probably for the rest of this video, I just want to talk about some current predictions that I see about where we're currently headed going forward, now that we do have the statistics and the numbers coming from the jobs report. So obviously right now at this time period, because of so much that's happening, the trajectory is not looking very good. I did show a graph earlier, as most people already saw before. If you guys haven't, definitely, I mean, you guys did. If you guys made it to this video, then you guys did probably hopefully saw that graph. But the idea really is that we were seeing signs of improvement, during this, I guess, since the pandemic happened, but that ever since it ended up happening, things are just not headed in the right direction at this current time period. Things are actually headed in the off direction. They're headed in the opposite direction of where we're really trying to go right now. So the prediction right now in the foresight is that things are not looking very bright, but it's going to be so dependent on what's the best way to phrase this, is that how our politicians inside of office right now regulate everything, how the Federal Reserve regulates everything that's going on, from things such as like inflation, the interest rate cuts, creating more jobs, and everything like that. All of this stuff is going to have a massive role to where our job market goes into the future. Some people see very positive foresight, which is really good news, but then there's obviously a lot of people that do not see very positive foresight. And the direction that we're currently headed in right now is not showing very strong signs of improvement. It's actually showing signs of worsening actually happening. But of course, this is a little bit subjective sometimes, because again, we don't know what the future holds. So feel free to leave a comment down with your prediction down below if you guys want to. But with that being said, that's really just what I wanted to share in today's video. So as always, if you guys made it to the end, thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully you guys found that relatively insightful. Like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell, and hope to see you guys next time. Thank you guys so much again.